I absolutely love is the word for it, working with this human. From the moment I met him, I could tell he was born to do this work. And I mean, he brings passion, energy, transparency, truth, and expertise in a way that our world just needs. And I am so thankful that he continues to step into our spaces. He continues to step into the spaces of the other community healers who are out there doing the work. And he continues to step in with young people when they need him most. Matt Reddam, you are a gift to us. He has designed a session where we get to explore the considerations needed to create and hold dialogue in spaces for the adults in our system. And that is so, so important. And, with limited resources and such high levels of stress on the adults, we really need to examine how we can strengthen our system by leveraging our resources and our partnerships. And there's no one better to rise to this call to action and help us explore how to do that than Matt Reddam. He is the current school and community wellness advisor for Butte County Office of Education and former policy and practice coordinator for Trauma Transformed. He is a regional expert on child traumatic stress and trauma-informed systems. He's a clinician, an advocate, a trainer, and consultant whose passion as a survivor drives the need to bring our systems into a state of equity and compassion. Matt, I'm so grateful for your time today, and I'm so grateful to work alongside you in our community. Welcome.
Thank you, Danelle. I'm going to share my screen. I'm not going to beat you all over the head with slides today, but I will use a couple just so we can kind of explore some of the concepts that I want to cover. I just want to take a second to thank Danelle and the North Valley Community Foundation, Youth Strong Fund, Giovanni, everybody that has now become not like colleagues, but family, right? I've been a therapist. That's like the letters that I never put after my name. That's what they say. That's what I've always done. And if you had told me that, 5 years ago, I'd be doing this, I don't know that I would have believed you. And although this, and I, like those of you who've heard me, like I capitalize this, THIS, I can't describe what we've been through because it has not concluded. But I can tell you that, I've always described resilience and trauma in a certain way. They are a coin, and they are different sides of a coin. And when we experience distress, when we experience overwhelm and trauma, it can be hard to look for resilience. Like we think we need to go somewhere to find it. But I think today, and I think the last 4 years in this community, you don't have to go far. You just simply flip the coin over. It's there. Santi Gray is a beautiful human being, and I get to work with her every single day. And I was embarrassing the heck out of her while you all were giving her props. And she came into this work and she said, I got to work with Matt Reddam. Like, believe me, that is, and, so I got to do some mentoring, and it was like 2 days into working with Santi that I realized that I was getting mentoring as well about how to be an ally, how to be a human being, how to center justice. So I want to talk today in a little bit of time, which is tricky for me, about holding dialogue space. This is a very fancy word for what our Native and Indigenous and First Peoples have done for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you this concept came out of my brain. Like most things I do in my life, I think I've thought of something brilliant, and then I Google it on the Google box, and it tells me that somebody else has been doing that for thousands of years, and I am happy. One of the things that occurred shortly after the fire, and maybe some of you have heard me say this before, is that like when our bodies and brains endure the type of overwhelm and stress and traumatic stress that they did, even if it's something simple like we are driving to work and we almost our car almost gets run into by somebody who's on their phone or whatever it is. We get this burst of energy. And the other thing that happens is we start to pay attention to everything that's familiar to us. The tree that we always pass, the quick stop that we always pass, the parking spot that we always park in. Our brains will seek safety at all costs. And what we learned after the devastating fires and in many respects after COVID is that a lot of those things were no longer there. We couldn't access them. So we existed in a space where our bodies and our brains were seeking safety and could not find it. But we found it. We found it in the faces of the people that we had worked alongside, some of us for 20 years, 30 years. We found it in one another. And at its core, when we talk about this concept of holding dialogue space, it is about using our common humanity as a tool to metabolize the stress that we are under, as a tool to understand one another's viewpoint, as a tool to reconnect. We have a divided society. We have a fractured society. We have forgotten how to listen, how to understand, and how to be curious. So when we think about this process of weaving into our systems space, we have to realize what we have come through. It's time to face the truth of our situation, that we are all in this together, that we have a voice, and figure out how to mobilize the hearts and minds of everyone in our workplaces and communities. Like Margaret talks about that as though this is a place that we need to get. We are at this moment now. We have been at this moment for the past 4 years. When I talk about systems, I talk about them as though they are this thing, and they are. But systems are a collection of us as human beings. But a system is designed primarily to do one thing and one thing only, to keep going. I work in the educational system. The educational system is designed to keep moving, regardless if it's you or I or any of us are within that system. The healthcare system is designed to keep going, and that's a good thing. We need those institutions, we need those systems, but it will do so at the cost of humanity. Systems by their nature are inhuman. Creating dialogue space is about infusing in systems humanity. Not with technical skills and evidence-based practices, but with the flesh of what and who we are. The things that we know, the things that we are born knowing. I'll talk to you about, some strategies about how to hold dialogue safe, but I will tell you right off the bat, you know how to do these things. When you sit with a family or a child and you look at them and you witness what they are feeling and experiencing and their pain, you are holding dialogue space. When you are interacting with somebody who you are virulently opposed to their viewpoint and you are angry, but you remain in that moment, you are holding dialogue space. And many of us have those spaces outside of our systems, outside of the work we do. But I believe it is time that we push our systems to carving that out within the work we do. Not just for clinicians or social workers, as much as those folks need it because they hear the stories, but for all of us. In education right now, we are losing people. We are losing good people. Because we as a collective system have not figured out how to do this. So what is this? And why do we need to do it? Well, I think I painted that picture rather clearly. We need to do it because we have now experienced and are experiencing a shift in the trajectory of our experience as human beings. Things are not going to be normal Normal was a facade to begin with, and it will continue to be. And our systems and our institutions are designed to meet the challenges of a world that has now changed. And the tricky thing is, if we don't infuse humanity as parts of that system and wait for the system to figure it out, we will be waiting until we retire. So we experienced in this county and in counties across the United States and across the globe what we call layered traumatic stress or layered trauma. It is not one thing or one event. It is the pressures that we experience on a daily basis. It could be the impact of compassion fatigue, of burnout, of secondary traumatic stress, or just of being a human being. But these impacts have been layered, meaning that our bodies and our brains and our systems have no time to stop and regather and refill. What is it? What is holding dialogue space? Well, I've made a nod to it here. I have two definitions that I can provide to you. One is dialogue that is structured. It's a facilitated conversation or series of conversations or contexts that foster relationships in which participants seek to reach a greater mutual understanding through curiosity and honesty. We know how to do this. We do this. How do we do this within a day of work? How do we do this within a staff meeting? What does this look like? What does this mean? The other way to conceptualize holding dialogue space is intentionally constructing moments, I will call them, of learning and healing, where one's full humanity, authentic self is invited and welcomed into the space. I have been in one environment in my 20-year career as a part of a system. Now, I took the easy road and worked for myself for a long time. So if I didn't have a healthy system, that was my fault. But when I worked at Trauma Transformed in Oakland, the experience that I had was it did not matter who I brought into that system, it was accepted. All my frailty, all my hurt, all my brilliance, all my pain, all my mistakes. And I'm proud to say that I have tried to, and I think we as an organization at the Office of Education have tried to bring that in, and we've tried to do it at a time where innovating is quite difficult. You know, this work came out of my desperate attempt to do something after the fire. So I sat with different departments in PUSD in Paradise Unified and said, let's just sit, let's circle up and we'll sit. And I did psychoeducation and people would share, and it didn't become a therapy session. I didn't ask other questions, and we kept doing it. And we realized that the act of being able to hold space had this thing to it. You know, we can, each and every one of us, feel isolated in a room full of people. You know, I have been in rooms of people 500 deep and felt completely and totally alone. When we experience adversity, one of the most insidious things that happens is we feel isolated. We begin to believe that our experience, whatever that involves, is not shared. Well, the masks are off, we're back in school, we should be good. Well, the smoke is cleared, everything's fine, I should be better. And these are expectations the world doesn't tell us, they're ones we place on ourselves. But as soon as we hear from somebody who we may have never seen and may never see again, our story, our feeling, our thought, our experience, it breaks that isolation. And we engage in what is called common humanity. If you ask me, what is the most consistent and predictable intervention for toxic stress, for ongoing stress in systems, it is that. It is the nod and the recognition that we are not in isolation, that somebody is experiencing the same thing we are. If we leave these things to chance, and this is why we call them holding dialogue spaces, we have to be intentional about curating these and setting these up. They do not need to be groups that are set. They can be us planning time to meet with 2 other people we love and trust in a predictable way. They can be during a staff meeting. They can be during a moment of innovation and problem solving within our system. So let me give you a sense of how that may look. And you can have access to all these slides, and they'll sort of talk a little bit about more in depth about where these concepts come from. But if we are facilitating these conversations, there are certain conditions we must create. We emphasize equity, right? We emphasize that everybody's voice in the room and in the space, whether that's a conversation or a group, carries weight. We have agreements. We set the tone for what respect looks like. We move. We keep moving. We don't hover on one experience. We move to multiple experiences. You minimize the role of the host or the facilitator. You provide prompts and guidance. What you do not do is you don't attach to specific outcomes. I know this will be effective if. I need to fix it. I have sat in spaces for 2 years trying to figure out how to push back against the stress within education. And guess what I figured out? I can't fix it. And in my attempt to fix it and to tell people you have to do this, I made it worse. And when I stepped back and allowed us to engage in common humanity, all of a sudden that fix that I was desperately searching for popped its head up. We expect in these spaces, whether we're talking about race or stress or trauma or productivity, that discomfort will be there, right? Discomfort is a part of holding space. It's a part of common humanity. And we have to abandon the fear that vulnerability is something to be experienced and brought forth only outside of work. What a delusion that we have created. What a delusion that somehow we exist as human beings separately in the work that we do, whether we're making widgets or we're doing therapy or we're teaching or we're helping, that is somehow a different human being that experiences pain and grief and loss outside of that job. It's a delusion we need to abandon. When we think about these spaces and this dialogue, the basics are very simple. And if all you do is a check-in, you are infusing humanity, right? Now, many people have done a lot of check-ins, especially in our organization, and they're like, okay, enough check-in. So we do something else. We innovate, we create, we find different ways that individuals can bring their whole self into spaces. You use reflective questioning, right? Whether we're talking about the nuts and bolts of our job or we're talking about how we feel, we reflect what is heard. And we close with intentionality, right? If all you do is bookend the spaces in which you inhabit with those you work with, you will infuse humanity because it will force you to stop. It is hard to stop. It's hard to stop. And we will not stop unless we have accountability, unless we have others, unless we have common humanity to push us to do so. Mutual understanding and empathy can be built through careful scaffolding of activities and experiences like today together. That is the job of educators. Take out educators and put whatever you do in there in expanding the space of dialogue. How can we be heard? Regardless of the issue. So what we do is, in these settings, we don't treat it like a therapy session, even if we're there to share our emotional experience. We contain. If somebody shares something, we validate it and we move to the next person. If we explore, now we open ourselves up to overwhelming that individual or the group as a whole. We nod to this. How are you going to center yourself during this meeting? We name that. We call that out. We ask people to talk with one another. Again, creating dialogue space should not be set aside for just when crisis happens. This should be woven into what we do and how we do it. I'm running up against time, so I'm moving. Included here are a lot of videos, a lot of resources that you can use to better understand the concept of holding dialogue space. And I want to say before I wrap up that, like, this has been it's been hard. I have no other way to say it. And it can be incredibly difficult to navigate that hard space. And it can be incredibly difficult to wake up with what we have all experienced, with high levels of uncertainty. And navigating that uncertainty drains us of our compassion, drains us of our resilience. But what I have been taught and shown through these tragedies, being in and around people who every single day are showing up, children, families, coworkers, educators, probation officers, social workers, every one of you, is that sometimes taking care of ourselves, sometimes being okay, doesn't look like we think it should. Sometimes it's about opening our eyes, getting out of bed, and moving. And turning to somebody, anybody within our system, within our world, and letting them know, I'm here. I don't know how I'm here, but I am here. Creating these spaces is about providing opportunities to turn to one another and let each other know we are here. We won't see this until years later. We won't see the resilience. We won't see the incredible nature of how we have made it through this until we are out of it, whatever it is. But you have to know you are exemplifying it now and every single day. So I want to thank you for letting me yak at you just for a little bit. Take care of yourselves and take care of one another. If you have any questions about what we talked about today, you can take those slides, do what you will with them. You can let me know. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Thank you so much, Danelle. Thank you to my community. I love y'all.
Well, Matt, we love you more. And I just have to say, okay, there goes our chat again, exploding with love and appreciation. Matt, I hope you see each and every comment. And I want to say, I am constantly amazed, not just your brilliant mind. I mean, you have so much to offer when it comes to your knowledge and expertise, but really it's your heart, it's your passion to serve. And Matt's one of my go-to people when I need someone to shoot a text to, word of encouragement, or I know will bounce back a word of encouragement to me. He's my go-to person. And I hope you all have at least a handful of people that when you're really feeling it, you can pull out your phone and shoot a quick text and know they're going to give you that nudge you need to make it through the day. So I'm so grateful to walk alongside you in this community and our work together. Thank you so much.